What comes to mind when you think of Richard Nixon? A corrupt administration? A failed presidency? The Watergate Scandal? For most people, when they think of the presidency of Richard Nixon, they think of Watergate. While this was a major event in not only Nixon's time in office, but also in American history, it should not be the only thing that Nixon is remembered for. He was truly unlike any other president, as he had started an open relationship with both China and the Soviet Union. He oversaw the first moon landing and the passing of the Title IX legislation, which had proved to be revolutionary for America. However, Watergate, which is widely regarded as the largest American political scandal in the 20th century, overshadows these achievements and has also left a long-lasting impact on his image and legacy today. While many debate the importance of Watergate since it has significantly impacted the government's relationship with the public, Nixon should also be recognized for his outstanding diplomatic and domestic achievements, which have forever impacted U.S. politics and American lives.
Richard Nixon's first term began on January 20th, 1969, after winning the 1968 election. He won the election with 301 electoral votes and faced both Hubert Humphrey and George Wallace. In just his first term, Nixon had achieved many groundbreaking accomplishments, such as the first moon landing, passing of the Title IX legislation, increasing relations with the Soviet Union, the creation of the EPA, and becoming the first president to visit China. Because of his achievements in his first term alone, Nixon won in one of the largest landslides in American history. He had a total of 520 electoral votes and won every state but Massachusetts and the District of Columbia. Many of the achievements Nixon had accomplished in his presidency are overshadowed by the Watergate scandal, and many now view him as more of a scandalous president rather than one that changed the country for the better. The opening of China was a monumental event for modern U.S.-China relationships, as it ended decades of no communication between the countries. Nixon became the first president to visit China in office, and it left a long-lasting impact on both countries, specifically when it came to trading. The trip occurred in February of 1972 after the decision was made that Nixon would travel to China to improve relationships with the country. It was a monumental moment for both the US and the world, as it started open relationships with China that hadn't existed for decades prior. The trip was a milestone for the two sides, and it was regarded as the week that changed the world and was truly the start of a diplomatic relationship between the two countries.
Nixon's meeting with Mao Zedong, the president of China at the time, took place on February 21st, 1972. The trip was beneficial in many ways as it increased Soviet military vulnerability, opened up space for a major domestic economic reform, and it helped increase global economic growth. If the trip had never happened, it may have been much harder for others to approach China in a peaceful manner. Strong forces for both the United States and China both heavily benefited from the relationship. The trip built a foundation for modern U.S.-China relationships, which are very strong and have allowed the countries to become such strong trade partners. In May of 1972, Nixon became the first president to step foot into Moscow and the second president to travel to the Soviet Union. He also signed the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, which significantly lowered the tensions between the two superpower nations. This meeting also laid the foundation for a joint space expedition in 1975. Considering the ongoing Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union, the trip was a success as it bettered the countries' relationships and brought them closer together and also lowered the tensions on both sides.
Nixon arrived in Moscow on May 22, 1972, and the trip ended on the 30th of May. 16 hours of the trip were spent talking with General Secretary Brezhnev, and they reached 5 mutual understandings. Those regarded the environment, science and technology, medical research, space exploration, and international trade. Nixon also signed the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty with Brezhnev, which reduced the production of offensive arms and limited the amount of ABM systems that could be active in the countries. In addition to the opening of China, it was another example of a great diplomatic achievement during Nixon's time as the President of the United States, as he once again brought two world superpowers closer together.
While Nixon had many other major accomplishments in his presidency, the thing he is most known for is the Watergate scandal. Though Nixon did not have any direct involvement in planning the break-in at the Watergate office building, he did heavily participate in the cover-up. The Watergate scandal had a total of 3 break-ins, but the burglars were caught on the break-in that occurred on June 17, 1972. The 5 men who were caught were James McCord, Frank Sturgis, Virgilio Gonzalez, Eugenio Martinez, and Bernard Barker. One of the burglars, James McCord, had worked for both the CIA CIA and the FBI, and it came as a shock to discover that somebody of that status was involved in the break-in. One of the first things that linked the Watergate break-in to the Nixon administration was a $25,000 check that was deposited into Bernard Barker's bank account, and the check was originally from the Committee to Re-elect the President. Along with this evidence, the phone number of Howard Hunt, who was a part of the White House plumbers, was found with the burglars.
On January 8th, the Watergate trials were opened. 7 people were convicted during the trials and are now dubbed the Watergate 7. The Washington Post was the main news source reporting on Watergate. The 2 main reporters were Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. They would go on to publish a book about their experiences and mention an FBI agent who was given the name Deep Throat. He was later revealed as Mark Felt. This agent had given them a great amount of information on the scandal. Senate hearings were opened by Senator Sam Ervin on May 7, 1973. Archibald Cox was appointed as the special prosecutor for the case on May 25th. He was in the Kennedy administration previously, and Nixon felt uneasy about him being selected to be the special prosecutor.
One of the major revelations of the Senate hearings was the existence of tapes. These tapes were crucial in proving that the president and the government were involved in the scandal. They also opened up the possibility of Nixon being impeached. A subpoena was issued for the tapes later on, but Nixon refused to hand them over, citing executive privilege. The Supreme Court had to step in order for them to be released. The 2 main tapes that were the most destructive to the administration were the June 23rd tape, or the smoking gun, and the cancer on the presidency tape. Nixon began losing the public's support after the Saturday Night Massacre. He had fired 2 people in order to have Archibald Cox removed as the special prosecutor on the case. Many believe this was the wrong course of action, and his approval ratings dropped drastically.
3 articles of impeachment were filed against Nixon. Article 1 was for obstruction of justice, Article 2 was for abuse of power, and Article 3 was for contempt of Congress. It was ultimately the cover-up that doomed Nixon and his legacy as a president, by covering up the wrongdoings of his administration to win the 1972 election.
One person who had lived in D.C. at the time of Watergate, Millie Balabina, shares her first-hand perspective on the scandal.
I recall Watergate as a divisive episode in American history. At the time, our family lived in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. My best friend and I were both stay-at-home moms, each raising 3 young kids. Unfortunately, she and I came to be on opposite sides. I supported President Nixon, who won a historic landslide victory and was a competent, hardworking president. The news on TV and in the Washington Post did not perceive him favorably. My friend believed the media portrayed Nixon accurately. I saw it as a witch hunt. To this day, I feel President Nixon was never given proper credit for all his accomplishments. Sadly, the press never acknowledged that Nixon led America through a period of peace and prosperity.
Nixon resigned on August 9, 1974, after he faced certain impeachment. He believed it would be the best course of action. Ford took office on August 9th and pardoned Nixon of all charges on September 8, 1974. The reason he did this was to offer closure to the Watergate scandal, as he felt the country needed to heal, but it received a lot of backlash at the time. Nixon's presidency was truly defined by Watergate rather than his accomplishments. Many tend to overlook his achievements in office and define his legacy as the Watergate scandal. To this day, many debate as to where he should be remembered in history. Watergate's impact is prevalent even today, as it is a reason so many citizens don't believe or have much trust in the government. This idea can all be traced back to Watergate and the belief that the government was corrupted and didn't operate for the country's benefit, but rather for their own good.
While the Watergate scandal left a permanent taint on the U.S. government, it shouldn't be the only thing Nixon is remembered for while he was in office. Nixon had a noteworthy amount of both diplomatic and domestic achievements, such as calming tensions with the Soviet Union, opening up relationships with China, overseeing the first moon landing, and dedicating $100 million for funding cancer research. These ultimately benefited the country as a whole for generations to come. The opening of China marked the beginning of a solid relationship with the country, which has been beneficial even today. They have been one of our major trading partners for both imports and exports, and our economy would likely not be the same without their partnership. Nixon also reduced tensions with the Soviet Union by signing the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty and brought them closer to the U.S. Though Nixon had some scandalous moments during his presidency, he should ultimately be thought of as a great president rather than be known as the president behind Watergate. His diplomatic achievements were crucial for the country and the government, and he should be remembered in American history as one that changed relationships across the globe rather than a president who started the debate over a president's power.